We're speaking now to Peter Schiff. Peter Schiff is an economist, financial broker, author, frequent guest on national news, and host of the Peter Schiff Show podcast. You may also recognize him from that viral video, Peter Schiff at Occupy Wall Street. I am the 1%, let's talk. It currently has over, I think it's 4.5 million views on YouTube. Peter, thanks for joining the show.
Oh, sure. Thanks for having me. And yeah, that video's got like tens of millions because it's so many different people have posted it. Just the version I posted on my own site a couple of years ago has 5 million views. But, you know, it had a lot of views before I got around to posting it.
Yeah, it's a great video. And if anyone hasn't seen it, it's worth going to check out. Peter, I have to admit that I'm more of a culture and social issues guy. I'm far from an expert on the economy, which is really, really an understatement. And I think I'm probably not alone in that. So I'm hoping that this could be a useful segment if we just talk about some kind of basic issues, because I want to learn, and the segment will be useful to me anyway, if nothing else. And that's what matters. So I want to get into crypto and Bitcoin and all that, but let's start with some of the more sort of traditional economic issues. Very broad strokes right now. Putting it simply, I have noticed that things are really expensive right now. And I went grocery shopping with my wife, which I rarely do, the other day, and I just had one heart attack after another looking at how expensive everything was. Had to be carried out in a shopping cart. So what is going on exactly? Where is all this coming from? Why is everything so expensive? What do you trace it back to?
Well, first of all, you ain't seen nothing yet. I mean, prices are just starting to go up, so they're going to go a lot higher. And I think even the acceleration is gonna pick up. So you're going to see bigger gains. And the question really is too is, you know, what's taking so long? You know, why were prices not moving up faster in the last few years? I mean, why all of a sudden? Because the Federal Reserve has been creating a lot of inflation. I mean, that's been their monetary policy. That's how they responded to the bursting of the dot-com bubble and then the housing bubble and then COVID, was they just printed a lot of money. But a lot of that money printing, which is really the inflation, right? You're creating more money, and so the more money there is, the more expensive everything is, because each unit of money is diminished as the quantity of money is increased. So as you have more dollars, each dollar is worth less, and now you need more of them to buy stuff. But a lot of the dollars that the Fed was creating ended up going into financial assets. And that was the way they were kind of entering into the economy and the way the Fed was administering this monetary policy. And so you saw big increases in stock prices or real estate prices. All of those price gains were being fueled by inflation. But now you're finally starting to see that inflation now showing up in the consumer goods prices. And this is particularly a problem in the wake of COVID, because what COVID did was it reduced the supply of goods, because a lot of people who used to work stopped working. And so they were no longer helping to produce goods and services that we all buy. They weren't working anymore. So the economy, not only in the U.S., but around the world, became less productive. And so that we weren't making as much stuff. The proper response for the Fed would have been to withdraw money from the economy, take money away so that the money supply was going down with the supply of goods and services, and that would have kind of kept prices in check. But instead, the Fed did the opposite. The Fed decided to print a bunch of money and mail it out to the people who were no longer working. And in fact, many of the people who got money from the government got more money from the government for not working than they used to earn when they still had jobs, except they were no longer producing anything. So we decreased the supply of goods and services to buy while simultaneously increasing the amount of money in circulation to buy them. And so it's a perfect storm for prices. And the government is going to throw fuel on the fire, you know, with this infrastructure program and all this other economic stimulus that is really just inflation, because it's all paid for by the Fed printing money. And you have to remember, every time the government spends money, it's a tax. You know, whether they want to acknowledge it as a tax or not, the cost of government is what it spends, not what it collects in taxes, what it spends. So every dollar of federal spending has to be paid for. And the way you pay for the spending that is financed when the Fed prints money to buy government debt, we pay for that with higher prices. So what you're really experiencing every time you go and buy something and the price is much higher than what you remember, that increase is really a tax. That is what all the government spending is costing you. It's costing those higher prices. And since government spending is going to go way up from here, the inflation tax to pay for it is also going to go way up.
So what you say that it's going to get a lot worse from here. What is our path out of this? I mean, how do we? Is there a path out? How do we recover from this?
Well, we have to cut government spending so we can, and then the Fed won't be printing as much money to finance all the debt. But there doesn't seem to be any indication that that's going to happen anytime soon. I mean, Washington is not going to stop spending money. I mean, even the Republicans couldn't cut spending. I mean, government spending went way up under Trump. Trump was a record spender until Obama. Trump didn't cut anything. And so even the Republicans, when they had the House and the Senate, kept increasing government spending. So why would government spending stop going up now when the Democrats love spending money? The Republicans at least pretend that they're fiscally conservative and that they want small government, even though they deliver big government. The Democrats promise big government, and they deliver even bigger government than they promise. And you've got a Federal Reserve out there that's willing to monetize all of it. So we're going to keep printing money. We're going to keep borrowing and spending money. And so we're going to keep paying for all that through inflation, which means the price of everything we buy is going to go up.
How much of the problem do you think here is someone who talks about these issues every day, how much of the problem is that the American public has become totally desensitized? I mean, we're so used to, my whole life, I'm used to hearing figures like billion and trillion tossed around, these massive figures that you can't even wrap your head around it. But for one thing, because they're so big, you can't wrap your head around it, so it just sort of goes literally over your head. And also we hear it so often that people just, it doesn't seem real to people. So do you think, is part of the problem that the American public just doesn't care that much because they're sort of so used to it by now and desensitized to it?
Well, I mean, the American public is obviously a big part of the problem because they're the ones that are voting for all these politicians that keep on recklessly spending money. But yeah, I mean, they don't understand the consequences of all this because they don't know how to connect the dots. And we haven't had a real crisis yet where anybody could pinpoint the blame. I mean, look, we got this morning, they announced the trade deficit for June. It was the largest single month trade deficit in U.S. history. We keep setting new records for big trade deficits. These are huge problems. This is evidence of a economy that is fundamentally flawed. I mean, there are major problems. All we're doing is importing. We're printing money and spending it on the stuff that other people make. And so, this is going to lead to a disaster. You can't build an economy, with these massive twin deficits. I mean, trade and budget deficits. But the public is really completely oblivious, and none of the experts are out there warning about it. Nobody else, even the people that are supposed to know that this is a problem, don't recognize it as a problem. And 20 years ago, 30 years ago, a lot of people were worried about the trade deficit when it was a lot smaller than it is now. Just like we had people who were worried about the budget deficits when they were a lot smaller. But the problem is the deficits got much bigger, and since we didn't have an immediate crisis, all of a sudden people stopped worrying and assumed that because we hadn't had a crisis that we never would. But the problem is now the problems are so much bigger than they were 10, 20, 30 years ago when people were worried about them, so that when we do have a crisis, that crisis is also going to be so much worse because it's a much bigger bubble that's going to be popping.
So I think this is a good opportunity here to transition over to cryptocurrency, which is one thing I really wanted to talk to you about, because a lot of people would say that crypto is the future. That's our salvation. It's the solution to a lot of these problems. Again, I know basically nothing, but looking at it, hearing people talk about crypto and Bitcoin and all this, my immediate sort of gut level reaction is that Bitcoin isn't really a currency. It's more like a Beanie Baby or something, like a collectible that has it's been assigned artificial value. Am I wrong? Is this really the future of currency?
No. No, you're not wrong. I mean, it is like a Beanie Baby, except not as valuable as a Beanie Baby, because the Beanie Babies were actually kind of cute, and you can put them in your bedroom and, decorate and, I don't know, you could toss them around, whatever. They have some utility. Obviously, they were way overpriced because, a bubble developed in Beanie Babies. But the reason so many people talk about Bitcoin being the future is because they bought Bitcoin and they hope it's the future. They're betting everything that it's the future. See, once you buy Bitcoin, all you can do is talk about how great it is because you have to convince other people to buy it. I mean, these are like the modern day, Harry Kirschners. It's like a big pyramid scheme because once you're in it, you have to get more people to buy in after you to get the price to go up. Because that's the only reason the price will go up if more people come in, right? It's like, Bernie Madoff. It's, a Ponzi, a chain letter pyramid. There's all sorts of ways to kind of describe it because it's not a pure Ponzi scheme. It's not a pure pyramid scheme, but it has elements of each. But one thing I know for sure is eventually all these cryptos, and, there's over 11,000 of them now, right? Bitcoin is just the most popular, but there's 11,000 of them. And the supply grows every day. I mean, every day somebody comes up with another one. There's no limit to how many of these things can be, conjured into existence. And then, of course, every single day, the supply of all the cryptocurrencies goes up because they create more of the ones that already exist. So the inflation in cryptocurrencies far exceeds anything that we're seeing in the actual fiat currencies that everybody is saying you got to get rid of. So in many cases, you're jumping from the frying pan into the fire when you get out of the fiat currencies into the fiat cryptocurrencies. But yeah, they're not even really currencies because they're not used as a medium of exchange. They're not used as a unit of account. You are correct. People collect them. That's what they do. They're basically digital tokens. And when you're buying Bitcoin, you are basically collecting these tokens. And right now, since more Bitcoin collectors are deciding to, join the club, and they want to start their collections, and they're buying. And so right now the value of the Bitcoin collections is going up because there's more Bitcoin collectors. But the only reason that you collect Bitcoin is because you think the price is going to go up. It's not like, a stamp collection, or, where you can display the stamps in a nice book and your friends can come over and you can show them, oh, look at this stamp or look at this one, or even baseball cards where you have the cards and you can, look at the card and read the stats and like, hey, this thing, you have something tangible. Nobody enjoys showing anybody their Bitcoin wallet. Unless it's because you're proud of the fact that it's got a big number on it. But, there's nothing special about having Bitcoin like it is about having, a baseball card that's 100 years old and maybe there's only 3 of them and you've got one of the 3, or whatever it is. But at some point, people are going to stop collecting Bitcoins. And that's going to happen when Bitcoin prices fall and they keep falling. And then people no longer are under the belief that the prices are going to go way up. Because that's the reason that a lot of people don't want to sell their Bitcoin is because they're convinced that they just hold on to them, they'll be rich. But once people no longer have that expectation, and Bitcoin is no longer seen as this, a lottery ticket that can't lose, a lot of people are going to want to sell, and there's going to be no new people to buy. And then the price just implodes because, there's nothing you can do with Bitcoin. Bitcoin doesn't actually have any real utility other than the fact that people think they're going to get rich by holding on to it. But the minute you no longer have that expectation, then why would you want Bitcoin? Because you don't do anything with it. You just hold on to it and hope it goes up.
Well, there's a lot more I can ask about Bitcoin. Unfortunately, we're coming up against a break. I am happy to discover at least that my priors have been confirmed, which is always nice. Peter Schiff, great conversation. Thanks for joining the show. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.